We good? All right. So we opened the discussion today by talking just a little bit about the nature of news and value for truth, and there is some of that. It's degreed, okay? And, when we talk about issues such as what went on with the electrical issues and the weather with Texas, and people are casting blame, and the news gets in the business of making determinations, especially from New York City, about what went on in Texas and the politics of that and all. Often their politics colors how they are going to determine truth. Okay? Truth. And then it takes statements. It was so-and-so's fault. If I'm correct, I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has blamed the Republicans for it, suggested that if only we had gone completely to the Green New Deal and we were, on her plan, that none of this would have happened. Others say, you're crazy. Not only crazy, you're lying. It's true, right? And if you listen to the news, put a date on there and start putting, put the date. If you listen to the news, you get different accounts of who's true, and it just, the way the news is portrayed often just depends on the politics of the storyteller, the news presenter, the news organization. Like Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. He is a Democrat of the pretty serious liberal persuasion. Can you imagine the direction he wants his newspaper to go? It's not hard to imagine, especially if you've read the Washington Post. So, we were talking before the camera started rolling just a little bit about how news, works. Fact is that they need to sell papers, they need to sell airtime, and in doing so, they need to suck you in. Bare facts often don't sell papers, okay? We need to, salt the oats in a way, make it personal, and so that doesn't. So often that can, that bias, that interpretation of the facts towards one side or the other can skew from just the basic truth. Sometimes the truth is boring, sometimes the truth hurts. Okay? One of the things we want to do is become epistemically virtuous people. Now there's a book, I'm trying to think, I think his name was Evans. It's not C. Stephen Evans. I'll come up with it. It's called the epistemic, not the epistemic virtues, but how to become epistemically virtuous, I think it is, and or intellectually virtuous. I'll recall the author and recommend the book to you. But the point is, how do you become an epistemically virtuous person? That is, intellectually, how do you go about your day and make the right decisions about what to believe and how to go about believing it? How to draw conclusions and make them right. Some would say skepticism is a bad thing. Some would say skepticism is a good thing. We should be skeptical about all things. What level of skepticism should we have about claims? As soon as somebody tells you something, should you just say, BS? Or should you say, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Right? Here's a side note. Did you know that gullible, the word gullible, is actually not in the dictionary? I know, huh? Did you know that?
No.
Isn't that interesting? Don't you think it should be in there?
Yeah.
It's in there. But you believe me, maybe. Inside you should be going, is that true? I gave you a proposition, a statement that's either true or false. In this case, I intentionally lied to you. Gullible, saying gullible, the word gullible, right? One who believes everything, without challenging it or even being the remotest bit skeptical. I pull this on my wife. And, the thing is, I mean, if you said BS to everything, then that might not be healthy either, right? But if you say yes, okay, I believe it to everything, there's a problem. So it's like, there is truth out there, right? Our goal is to find truth in a corresponding way. But it's not to believe that everything that is stated is true in a corresponding way. There needs to be a bit of healthy skepticism. What is a healthy skepticism? A healthy skepticism says, I hear what you're saying. I will consider the truth value of it, okay? And I will consider the truth value of it based on certain rational, evidence, things that seem reasonable. There's a color with, there's the color blue, right? And when you say I saw blueness without color, you wouldn't be able to say that's clearly a violation of reason, right? Because all blue has color because it is color by nature. Something's not going to violate its nature, so you go with that. But let's take some issues in the news. There's an insurrection, at the Capitol, right? And one guy dies, and they say he got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher, right? And that killed him, and he was... Does anybody else hear that one? You heard it. That's not hard to believe. It really isn't. I mean, in fact, the news reports that, and you go, yeah, that's very believable. And you can trust, usually, that's just a statement of fact. That's not like they came in looking for him, and they said, do you have a D on your name? Did it turn out to be true? Turned out to be false. Turned out to be false. He didn't die from getting hit with a fire extinguisher. In fact, he didn't get hit with a fire extinguisher. The news, the Washington Post, New York Times, retracted that statement. But not before they had already written a follow-up to the original story saying he died from wounds from being hit with a fire extinguisher. They wrote another story about it, said he was rushed to the hospital with a gaping wound, right? Well, that didn't happen. He went home, emailed his brother, texted a few times, then went to the hospital later on and succumbed to something we yet have been made aware of yet. We don't know how the guy died. And it's speculated that he died of either a stroke or a heart attack. But what seems so it didn't seem irrational to believe at all that the guy died from, you have a bunch of people barging into the Capitol, yelling, screaming, some breaking things, swinging hammers, breaking. Well, you saw that stuff, right? You saw the videos? And then all of a sudden, it's not hard to believe that a woman gets shot, Not hard to believe that a guy got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher. Yet it turned out to be false. Yeah. Who started it? I don't know. So, now, with that in mind, we could generally read the paper and go, certain facts such as like that should be true. It's okay for us to believe it until presented with other evidence, correct? I think it's okay. There's nothing weird about a news reporter saying, I heard that the guy got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher. I have no problem believing that. I believed it at first myself, and then upon later reflection, I was willing to change that view. So one of the things is to hold views relatively, have a relative level of skepticism, as I said, but then hold your views tentatively. What does it mean to hold your views tentatively? Well, you go, okay, I'll believe it in light of the evidence, but somewhere down the line, I have to be willing to let it go if the evidence tells me to. have to be willing to let it go if the evidence tells me to. All of you will eventually, if you have not already, be called for jury duty. And you'll be called upon to answer according to where the evidence points. Not whether you like or dislike the person or company or whatever on trial. You're called to answer to the evidence, right? How many of you guys watched the second impeachment of Donald Trump? You did. You watch the whole thing?
I watched some of it, but not all.
Did you watch the when the prosecutors made their case about how bad Donald Trump was and how he incited the violence? You did? Did you watch the defense? So what did you anything stick out to you about the defense?
Just the fact that they compiled a whole bunch of videos of Democrats saying the word fight.
Oh yeah, that was funny, huh? Well, one of the things they said is Donald Trump was inciting violence by using the word fight, correct? As though they've never said it, right? As though if you use that word fight, that means literally fight, not stand up, stand your ground for what you believe in, but they're saying it must be literal, fighting, right? And so what the guy did was the Republicans said, "Oh yeah, you want to talk about that?" And all of a sudden they started, showing the Democrats all, "We need to fight. They're just cutting all these guys, and his very accusers saying that. Yeah, that's one thing. Another thing they did was they showed the defense took the video evidence that the prosecution used against Donald Trump, and then they showed the raw video footage, and they showed how the Democratic prosecutors manipulated the video evidence and produced, literally, they created evidence out of nothing, right? And so what was the goal of the evidence, the Democratic videos, was to cause you to believe that Donald Trump incited violence, okay? And then they show how they actually created these. They doctored the evidence, okay, in a court of law, a real court of law, not in the Senate. That would, first of all, be thrown out. It never would have made it. You can't use, edited video and stuff like that. But had they used that, they probably would have gotten in trouble by the law. In this case, they were just, in my opinion, humiliated by whomever watched it, because it was pretty blatant. It was pretty bad. Okay, so if you watch that, it's pretty embarrassing. So if one were to be intellectually honest, they could say, and this is where I'm going to say that many of the senators, even Republicans, were not intellectually honest with this, is they still voted to impeach him and to find him guilty of inciting violence, even though the evidence that was presented was clearly bad evidence, when it's unethically doctored like that, to do that, okay? Now, if there's other evidence that they know of, then that's fine. But to still, maintain this view that somebody's guilty of something in light of evidence against that would be intellectually dishonest. And the question isn't, these people in my mind are not being intellectually dishonest with themselves. I believe that they're honest with themselves inside. They're like, yeah, I don't believe he committed this insurrection or incited it. We just hate the guy's guts and we want him to never run again. That's my view, okay? They're not being intellectually dishonest with themselves, they're being intellectually dishonest with the voters. My suggestion is, though, for you to be intellectually honest with yourself. Okay, those are politicians. We should suspect that they're going to lie. Okay? They're political animals. But my question is, are you willing to believe in light of evidence against the beliefs sometimes you hold? Had you asked the question, could I be wrong? So the two things I've started with so far is to have a healthy dose of skepticism, just a healthy, not an excessive amount. And then second, have a willingness to change your beliefs to correspond with the evidence. to take you where the evidence allows it to go. Hold your views tentatively, I said. Now, some views are going to be held on tighter, and that's based off of evidence and conviction. And not only evidence and conviction, but what value does the truth of that belief hold? Right? Like, it doesn't matter to me if the guy got hit with a fire hydrant or not, or fire extinguisher. Okay? I mean, because it doesn't affect me that much. Okay? Whether or not a medicine will help my child or not, the truth of that, there's hope in that. There's something more to it than that, okay? There's more value, it impacts me more. So there are some things I'll put more trust in because it seems more important to me. It has more impact. And that's understandable. I mean, belief in God is clearly something we take seriously, and I believe in God, and I'm committed to the truth of that. For one reason is I do believe the evidence is there, but second, the value of it is there in that without God there is no hope. If there's no God, there's no hope for heaven, right? Your best chance at a good life is here on earth, and it's not that great, okay? Once it gets to, I mean, I love life, don't get me wrong, I enjoy for being here, okay? I'm not, checking out anytime soon. I'm just saying, compared to the hope of heaven, if this is as good as it gets, well, okay. So, there's a value in that one, okay? We could stake a lot more on that. We put a lot more of our chips down for that. Make sense? Okay, so there's really, I'm giving you a thing. Then there's willingness to believe. Not, with our skepticism, we also have to have a willingness to assent to certain things. So we have to have a willingness to let go, and then we also have a willingness to pick up beliefs. We also have to have a willingness to understand, or an understanding that beliefs, often we don't have a whole lot of power over what we believe. How many of you can unbelieve that 2 + 2 is 4? You can deny it, but can you unbelieve it? So part of being intellectually virtuous is coming into contact with reality in such a way that we get to know it, where the truth of it is as undeniable as 2 + 2. Okay, does that make sense? So I told you on the last video we were going to transition from, if you watched we went from perceiving God, and then I put up a video just recently, I hope I put out the announcement for it too, of is science the enemy of religion? How many of you watched that? You did. Okay, it doesn't matter the order of which, I said that I was going to talk about the next part, which is, can atheists claim the intellectual high ground? Okay? It doesn't matter if I give you this one before or after the science one. It doesn't matter. The order is irrelevant. Okay? It has to do with epistemic virtue. It has to do with philosophy of science, philosophy of religion, and epistemology, having to know things. Okay? What is an atheist? An atheist is one who believes that God does not exist. It is not one that has an absence of belief. Okay? The atheist believes that there is no God. All right? One who says, I don't know if God exists, is agnostic. The Greek word for knowledge is gnosis. Whenever you see a before something, it is the negation of that thing. Apathy, without emotion or without caring, right? Atheist, without God, no God. Agnostic, no knowledge. And you can be agnostic about a great many of things. And usually when people say I'm agnostic, that what they're usually meaning is they're agnostic religiously. And okay, to say you don't know may seem it can be skeptical, yes, and it can seem to be like you're somehow healthy and well, I just don't know what to believe, and that's honest, and okay, that may be fair. Might be the result of intellectual laziness, but if you recall, when I talked about belief earlier in epistemology, we asked the question of, what does it take to believe something? What amount of convincing or certainty does one have to have? And I suggested, in line with the philosopher J.P. Moreland, it takes about 51% of certainty to say 51 to 49% certainty. Yeah, 49% of doubt, which is a great amount of doubt, but 51% tips the scale and says, hey, I believe it. Not really committed, but I believe it, okay? Some of us are a lot more certain about certain things. 2 plus 2, I'm pretty radically certain, okay? My only doubt is that somehow I've been fooled all my life, and I think the burden of proof would be on somebody else to show me that, my first grade teacher, my parents were wrong on this one, okay? And so I have a pretty high amount of certainty, okay? So with the agnostic, I just asked the question, where does your doubt, where's your certainty? Is it 50-50? Because if 50-50, then you can say you don't know, right? If it's 51-49 in favor of atheism, you're an atheist. You believe more that there is no God than there is. Now, I would challenge that and ask them how they live their life, and you usually find out that they live their life more theistically than atheistically, and I'll tell you why as we discuss this little article I have that I wrote, and the article again is called "Can Atheists Claim the Intellectual High Ground?" And what do I mean by that when I say the atheists will claim the intellectual high ground? One thing is that they usually will say they're smarter than, theists. What's a theist, by the way? A theist is one who believes in God, okay? Now, Christians are theists, Jews, those who practice Judaism are theists, Muslims are theists, okay? They believe in God, they believe God is personal, they believe God has communicated to man. That's a distinction from deism, which believes that God exists, but really has nothing to do with man. God just created us and left us to our own, devices, and, that's it. Okay, some would argue that Thomas Jefferson was a deist, and I might argue the same. As much as I'd like him to be a Christian, probably not true. Although he liked Jesus as a teacher, but he denied his divinity. All right, so what would it mean for an atheist to claim the intellectual high ground? One, either that they're somehow cognitively superior to us, that their ability to come up with true beliefs is better than ours, and that we're just somehow biologically and intellectually inferior to them. Okay, that would be one. All right. 2, that they're intellectually more virtuous than us, than we are. I say we. That sounds like I'm presupposing all of you are Christians. Some of you may be atheists. I've had plenty of atheists as students in my day. That there's this that they're just intellectually more virtuous, and that they're willing to follow the evidence where Christians, Muslims, Jews, and the like prefer to ignore the scientific evidence. I always say that, as though science is not bad. Remember, science is a great tool if we're talking about breaking it down into its individual disciplines. Biology is a great tool. Geology is a great tool. Chemistry, they're all great tools, okay? And they can be useful in a great many ways for all sorts of things, technology and knowledge. All right, now, but this idea that they're better or more intellectually virtuous, right? Either that they're cognitively better, more equipped, right? Or that they are more virtuous and that they're willing to follow the evidence where we are blinding ourselves. But there's a third way, which this article really discusses, that they just have more true beliefs about religious reality than we have. And that's specifically that God doesn't exist. And they just happen to be in the superior position as having the corresponding belief, the belief that corresponds to reality. Whereas the theist, and in this case I limited it to Christianity, but you could apply it to other theistic beliefs, that they are correct and we are incorrect, okay? That they're superior in the truth value of their statement. Now, one of the things, there's several things I point out in this article about that, is they presuppose that Christian views or religious views in general are merely blind faith. Now, how many of you have been taught about the word faith? Can anybody tell me what the word faith means? Nobody. You, go ahead. Sir, remind me of your first name and then tell me what you think the word faith means.
Xavier.
Thank you, Xavier. That's perfect. I should have remembered that, but please, Xavier, go ahead.
Just the definition of faith would be just a sense of belief in something higher than yourself or more than yourself.
More than yourself? Okay.
Or bigger than yourself.
So it has to do not just a belief, but kind of the subject of belief. So it's not just like I have faith that 2 + 2 is 4. You're like, well, that's not really too high, right? That's not good enough.
Right.
Okay. I like that you started with belief, though, because I when I define faith, I define it as a type of belief. Okay. And so to sit there and say faith is anything but that, it doesn't fall under that, it seems odd. Okay. But I think it's a type of belief, but you do seem to, faith is usually talking about God. That's usually where it comes from, faith, right? Or I have faith in this person, right? Something out of your hands, right? Do you have anything to add to that? Remind me your name.
Me?
Yeah, your name's me?
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just picking on you. Go ahead.
My name's Noah.
Noah, that's right, Noah. I want to remember these names so bad. Xavier, pull down your mask. I want to see your face. Nice. Okay, put it back. Noah, do the same. I want to see, that helps me remember you guys. Okay, now I don't just see a couple eyes poking out of the thing. Okay, Xavier and Noah. Add to Xavier's definition.
I was gonna say a disposition to believe it's true.
Yeah, but a belief is a psychological disposition to hold a proposition is true, correct?
Yes.
And faith is a type of belief, right? So certainly there will be a disposition to hold that proposition as true, correct?
Correct.
So what makes that different than just mere belief? We want to add, if faith is a type of belief, we want to make sure there's something special about this. Go ahead.
Is it because it doesn't have any substantial evidence?
See, that's what I was looking for, and that's false. But that's usually what people think. They use the word blind faith, and I didn't want to spoil it and give you the answer. People can think, oh, it's just blind faith. Who's not heard that? Let's raise your hand if you have not heard that. You've never heard blind faith as a term?
Not really, no.
Interesting. Okay, cool. But you have heard it. He's like, oh yeah, I have. Say it every day. Okay, but is faith really blind? Now, if we look at the biblical definition of faith, and that's, if you're going to talk about if the Bible calls you to faith, right? Should we not go by how they define it rather than some non-believer? I think that would be fair. Okay, if they're going to call you to drive in a car, and they tell you which car, don't listen to somebody else. Listen to them tell you which car to get in. Okay. So when they talk about it, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence, did you catch that? Of things unseen, or things not seen. You've heard this. You could quote that, can't you? Say it for me. Faith is the
Faith is the,
substance.
yeah, substance of things hoped for and the evidence not seen.
The evidence is just the substance of things hoped for, comma, the evidence of things not seen. That's interesting, isn't it? Because it didn't say faith is the substance of things hoped for that you cannot prove at all. Right? Didn't say that, did it?
No.
What did it say? It is the substance and the what?
Substance and things of things.
Evidence.
And evidence.
Substance of things hoped for. Okay? Our faith, the substance, does go back to Noah. Has to do with not just, or maybe it wasn't Noah. No, it was Xavier. Who had to do with there's something greater that we're hoping for. That it's the substance of the subject of our belief is something like you call it outside of ourselves or greater than ourselves, right? Talking those things we hope for. What do we hope for? And in a Christian sense, what is the hope? The hope is in the resurrection. That Jesus was the Messiah. That there will be a general resurrection. That once we leave this body via death, we will inherit another one. Okay? That we will be resurrected and be with God. All right? That's one of the things hoped for. The evidence of this, which is what? Not visible to us. We don't have evidence in that. I mean, we don't have the visual evidence of things like that. But as we've seen, not all things that we believe can be seen or tested through the senses. You don't believe 2 + 2 is 4 because you could see it, do you? Can you see a 2?
You can see things that signify the value of 2.
Yeah, you can see the things that signify the value of that. But I didn't ask if you see the things. I'd say exemplify. That's a better way. Not signify, but exemplify. They exemplify 2-ness. But you don't see the 2-ness. No. No, you don't. Right? But you understand what it is. You understand it. You recognize it when it's there. Good. There's this assumption that their belief is better because it is not grounded on blind faith, whereas they assume that theists' beliefs are grounded on just blind faith. That is an assumption. They do not prove this, and anytime they get into a debate, and I mean an academic debate, where you get an academician up there to show the why one believes in God and all that, and argue for him, they find out really quickly that that the Christian faith is not grounded merely on, I believe this because I believe this. Okay? Now, many of you were raised that way because you were not presented with good arguments for the truth of Christianity, for the existence of God. And so you assume the position of the atheists, that they have the good arguments and you don't. And this is specifically a symptom of those who go to public school. I went to public school my whole life, up until college. I just assumed you had to believe in God with no evidence, an absence of evidence. Why? Because my teachers told me this. Now, why would my teachers tell me this? Well, because they didn't believe in God. And they assumed it. And my parents were not really well equipped to give me answers on this. They weren't great theologians or philosophers. So as a little boy, K through 12, I'm at the mercy of these, what I considered educated people, to tell me that there is no evidence for God's existence. In my senior year of high school, I took a night school class, an advanced English class, and I'm going to tell you the guy smuggled it in, I'll say. The teacher had us read a little Thomas Aquinas about the 5 proofs for God's existence. Let me tell you, they were powerful. And they got me through some of the worst times, the toughest times in my life of faith, okay? Now, it's my suspicion that if he got caught teaching us that, he would have been fired. This is a public school, remember? Thou shalt not teach that God exists in the public school. Okay? But just because you've never been taught these evidences, just because you've never been taught the arguments, it does not follow that they don't exist. But the atheist assumes that they exist, and any attempt to do so in the public square will be squelched. So many of you have never heard these arguments, which you will in this class very soon. You will hear them. But for those of you who've never heard them, those of you who've grown up in the public schools, you probably have been taught all your life there are no good reasons to believe in God. But you were taught that by people who don't believe in God. Okay? So don't listen to those who disagree with you necessarily. Listen to those. Go to the experts in your area. So there's this assumption of that intellectual, there's this assumption of this intellectual superiority because they assume that you are operating on blind faith. But let's start with the premise, or not the premise, the proposition. Are we running out of time already? No. The proposition that this article centers around. Their intellectual superiority centers around their belief that they have the true belief that God does not exist. Okay, remember, a proposition is a statement that's either true or false. The word atheism means no God. To be an atheist, one must hold the proposition God does not exist as true. Okay? If you are an atheist, that means you hold the proposition God does not exist as a true statement. If you are going to utter the statement to somebody, then the burden of proof is on you. What is the proof of the truth of that statement? Now, the atheist is accused, the theist, the believer, that they have blind faith. Yet, this article argues a little that the atheist is operating on blind faith. That there's an assumption of atheism and an assumption that the theist has no evidence. But what is the evidence for atheism? Can anybody give me evidence that God does not exist? Has anybody ever been critiqued for their belief in God? You ought not believe in God because of this. What? Give me the answer. Well, I give you the typical ones that the atheists give you. One of them is they will often, well, first of all, remember, you've got to prove this, okay? If you're going to make a claim, you got to prove it. That's what I got to say. If I tell you that Jesus loves you, he died on the cross for you, you better believe that you say, why should I believe that? You are in the right to ask me to give you evidence for that. I'm the one trying to convince you, right? Somebody comes up and tells you, you shouldn't believe in God. Tell me why, I would say. Prove it. Which one of the things they'll say, well, the Bible sucks. You know, they probably won't use that word. They'll probably say it's false. It's full of inaccuracies. You can say, look, the Bible, they'll say, the Bible was written by men. You say, of course it was. Who would you think it was written by, right? You know, do you think it just fell out of the sky? No. But let's pretend it's full of inaccuracies. Let's pretend it does have let's pretend it has all sorts of errors. How do those errors prove that God does not exist? All it proves is that the Bible has errors about God. Statements about God, or statements about men, or statements about cities, or statements about people. But how does that prove that God doesn't exist? It may only prove that the Bible is inaccurate, which I can make arguments. There are plenty of arguments that suggest that it isn't inaccurate, okay? But that's another argument. That has to do with theology. That doesn't have to do with God's existence. Did God exist before the Bible did? Of course he did, if he's God. So God existed and there was no Bible at some point. So God's existence has nothing to do with the Bible, and that's one of the things they'll use. So they're drawing bad inferences, and that would be one of them. Another one is, I think there's a better argument of theirs. It's a difficult argument, but it doesn't get rid of God. It's the argument from evil. They suggest, how much time do we have left? Are we done?
Yeah.
And no, you guys are so interested. We're going to have to table this one for next time. On Wednesday, we'll bring it up. Before you cut that off, I know you all watch these to the very end anyway, right? No. I watch the metrics. Look, if you want to show up to all the classes, please do. There's plenty of room. Okay? I think the Wednesday class has less people. Okay, so please show up, and I think it's better for you anyway. Okay? Then you get to go back on the video and go back for the tests and stuff. Okay? With that being said, I'll finish this up on Wednesday. Darn it, see this class, I feel like I just start clearing my throat and you guys are out of here.
There's a thing, like, it says someone is trying to sign into your Apple ID in Lumpur.
In Kuala Lumpur?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it won't let me stop the video until I, like...
Oh, I see what it says here. Let's see, Apple ID sign in requested. Your Apple ID is being used to sign in to a device near Kuala Lumpur. Don't allow.